In the last half-century, Britain has been transformed. There's been an explosion of choice, which has changed our way of life completely. Last week, we saw how the 60s broke with the past. Now, we bring the story up to date. We'll see how the last 2 decades changed the lives of 3 real families. They started our series with very different backgrounds. But now they're about to experience an era which led to more social mobility than ever before and broke down the old class barriers between them. The times they have lived in have shaped us all. (1977) was a crucial year for the Corbett family. A new head of the family was installed. Johnny Corbett took charge of Rowallan Castle in Ayrshire in Scotland. In the 40s and 50s, the Corbetts had been a rich aristocratic clan. And Johnny had been brought up with a sense of his own destiny.
It wasn't like you sat in a schoolroom and it was drilled to you. You will one day be Lord Rowallan and you will behave like this and you will do that. It wasn't that. It was much more just natural. You just learnt it by watching and learning by example of what was expected of you. My grandfather being Governor General of the state of Tasmania in Australia, one learnt an enormous amount about protocol. We certainly had members of the royal family coming to stay. But to me it didn't feel as if one was being snobbish. One didn't feel as if it was anything other than normal, because that is what I'd been brought up. It was just exactly the same as anybody else going along to meet their friends in the pub in the evening.
Johnny inherited the estate when he was only 30. He did so because the rightful heir, his father Arthur, had been disinherited after he ran off with a transsexual. By the 70s, Arthur was in exile in Spain, where he was to end his days working as a barman. By now, the Corbetts' wealth had declined. And what was worse, when Johnny's grandfather died, he had divided up most of the family's liquid cash among all his children and grandchildren. This meant that from now on, Johnny was going to have to struggle to stop the estate going bankrupt. For the Ashworth family too, 1977 was a watershed. They're a family of doctors and teachers who live in Didsbury in Manchester. In the 40s, Henry and Betty had witnessed the founding of the NHS, and their fortunes had risen with the growth of the welfare state.
This was going to be a new world with new houses and a socialist philosophy. And we believed this.
By 1977, their daughter Janet was a teacher, and son Mark was finishing his medical training. He and his wife Liz were also about to start a family of their own.
And I knew that he wanted children, and I kept saying, no, 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 not, don't want to, don't want to. You know, I've got my career here and quite happy, thank you. And then suddenly it dawned on me that we were getting older and everybody else was having children, and that this point would come when we hadn't got anybody else. So I decided to stop taking the pill and forgot to tell him. I thought, well, you know, I'll come off the pill and it'll take 6 months probably before anything happens, or within 6 weeks I was expecting Simon.
The next generation of Ashworths would soon be on the way. But for Mark and Liz, the future was going to bring heartache as well. third family are the Beardsalls. They're from the East End of London. In the 1940s, they'd been brought up in great poverty. Eldest sister is Dora Challingsworth. She's the matriarch of the family and has always been proud of her roots.
We was quite proud to be a working class family, to be honest. People get the wrong impression of EastEnders. I think people get the impression, oh, Cockneys, they're dirty, that's far from the truth. We didn't have a lot. I mean, you had a wooden table. We didn't have an highly polished table like some of the middle class or upper class had, but that table was scrubbed.
By the 70s, Dora was a leading figure in her trade union, representing women at the giant Ford plant in Dagenham.
The management knew that I had respect from the shop floor, so they knew that I could be backed at any time. I'd only have to call for my backing and I would get it. So they knew, like, how far to go, really.
As a shop steward, Dora was soon to be thrust into the limelight. But her most bitter dispute was to be as a mother. For in time, the question of class was to divide her family. For Britain as a whole, it looked at first as if the decade might end on a high. The climax of 1977 was an old-fashioned celebration of national unity, as the country marked the Queen's Silver Jubilee.
I was working in Ford at the time as a sewing machinist, and of course the Jubilee was coming up and everyone had to dress up, and so we all got together and said, right, we'll have a hat competition. So we all had to make our hats, and we had garters on as well. We made our garters, and the manager got to hear about it, and he bought a car around, a brand new car, for us to all sit on and pose on for photos. So he wanted us to walk down a ramp like models, and we said, no, we draw the line to that, you know. Oh, we did have a laugh. And that's what it's all about, working with about 400 women.
We had a family party, just for a change, at our house. Then afterwards spilled out onto the street.
We had a street party.
Had a street party. We put trestle tables all the way down the street. And I remember Simon was dressed in red, white and blue. We all tried to wear red, white and blue. He liked hats, so I think he had a
Union Jack
hat on.
But the mood of national unity was soon under threat. Within a year, a series of disastrous strikes brought Britain to its knees. Rubbish piled up in the streets. Even the gravediggers went on strike. A sense of crisis engulfed the country.
We were brought up to think that, you know, trades unions really did do an awful lot of good for the workers, which indeed they did, but they got too big for their boots. And of course they killed the goose that laid the golden egg.
I seem to remember as a medical student sort of helping push patients down corridors and things like that.
Industrial anarchy seemed to be arising. We had strikes on the railways.
Well, there were strikes everywhere.
We were really looking for somebody who'd instill some discipline into the workers of the world.
The country soon found someone. In 1979, the leader of the Conservatives, Margaret Thatcher, was elected, and she said she could sort out Britain.
Where there is discord, may we bring harmony. Where there is error, may we bring truth. Where there is doubt, may we bring faith.
Maggie Thatcher came into power, and she seemed to be the woman who was going to tame the unions. And even I, with all my principles, felt that she was a dose of the right medicine for a time.
The Conservatives began the 1980s with a deliberate attempt to encourage enterprise. With a great deal of hype, a series of nationalized industries were privatized. Between the selling of these shares and council houses, millions of people suddenly had real capital for the first time. The most unlikely people were caught up in the enthusiasm.
I didn't tell no one about that. I mean, we just took shares out and like the gas shares and things like that, but that was looked down on, but I never told them. I just did it and mind my own business, mind your own sort of thing, you know. When they started selling council property, obviously the union didn't believe in all this, but if you've got a choice of buying your home or staying there renting it and bettering yourself by buying it, then OK, we're going to do that. I mean, when I went to the union meetings and told them I'm buying my house, oh, that was terrible. But a lot's done it since.
Looking after number one became the creed of the 80s. And when Dora's daughter Tracy left school, she too set out to do exactly that.
I can't say that the school actually recommended anything particular, and you know, my mum was in Fords and that was a possibility, I suppose, but you never want to end up where your parents are.
Tracy found work as a typist in a bank in the very heart of the financial markets, the City of London. And here she discovered a whole new world.
The people up there just seem to have a lot more quality. People used to say they're going to quite exotic places for their holidays and always going out for meals. It was just going out for dinner tomorrow night, and that sounds different to going down the pub on a Friday night and playing pool and going home. You taste these fine wines and this lovely food, and it's all, you know, the nouveau cuisine food all decorated, and it's like, wow.
Tracy had arrived at just the right time, for the financial markets were booming, and for young and ambitious people, there were plenty of opportunities. She became a dealer, and married one too.
The city was on a high, everyone, you know, everywhere was making money. You know, all the corporate events was like big, and you know, if one company did this, another company would do it bigger and better. The magic days, really, where everybody remembers just being able to enjoy it. People were, you know, headhunted and, you know, paid more money, and it's like, wow, you know, this is just never going to end.
She was changing her voice a little bit, you know, but she had a phone voice. Because quite often I've rung and she's, oh, I say, oh, crikey, you're posh, and you know.
Tracy was leaving her roots behind. And this was to cause tension in the future. But just as one family was moving up in the world, another was facing the prospect of moving down. At the beginning of the decade, Johnny Corbett was beginning to realize what he had taken on. The castle was turning out to be a burden.
It was extremely expensive to heat. The heating system was very old. And it was extremely expensive to keep clean, insofar as you need an army of people to keep it clean. I simply had not got the money coming in to be able to afford to do that. So there was a gradual decline from when my grandfather died in 1977, when there were 25 staff, down to